Well, talking about working with young people, James, you work with very young kids, and so why did you do that?
Well, the truth is that all my films have, so far, have both adults and children, but everyone says, oh, you work with young kids. And the reason is because nobody remembers the adults, right? You just don't, you remember the kids. I don't know, we're biologically programmed to do that. We pay more attention, they need help, the adults, they're kind of on their own.
You also photograph young people very beautifully.
Thanks.
Right.
But like in the film I'm making now, it's about a school, and like half the characters are teachers and the other half are students. I know that the audience is really only going to remember the kids, but I mean that's one thing. But the real reason is, in my case, because I'm making films about subject matter which is going to be pretty foreign probably to most of the audience. Although in the case of Afghanistan, there's a diaspora of millions of Afghans living outside, and I'm sure there'll be a large part of the audience of the movie. But still, you're expecting an audience to come in to a new world, a world that they have been conditioned to fear, probably. In the case of the United States, looking at films about the Middle East, everyone just thinks it's full of violence and that it's quite dangerous, and how can you even be there? How can you even live for 2 years in Iraq, or Pakistan or something? I mean, won't you just get kidnapped right off the street? And so one way to give people a more realistic picture of these countries automatically is by telling a story from a child point of view, because suddenly it's if there are kids around, we all know it's safe in a way. We know we can be there. There are kids there. How dangerous could it possibly be?
And is that was a conscious calculation on your part as you set out to make the film? I think
it's kind of a discovery that I've made as I've gone along. Just it's something that I figured out.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And can I say I think that illuminates a very interesting aspect of documentary filmmaking, which is that it's, on the one hand,
it's just you.
There are people who don't want this story told, but I'm going to tell it anyway. Which is, on the one hand, it's this very pure profession, which is to say, what am I doing?
I don't know, but you're doing it.
It's a very pure profession in the sense you're just going out there and telling the truth. But, it's also very strategic, which is there's a lot of competition for what people are going to watch. I don't just mean financial. I mean that there's a lot of choices that you have to watch. And so how can I, the filmmaker, pull you into my world? And sometimes that's very calculated, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that is part of your job, is to be strategic about how you can involve this audience in that. And I didn't know, James, you were thinking about that, but I find it very interesting because it's a strategy.
Well, we discovered that we made the trilogy in China. The most successful one is the one with children, and at the beginning we were very remember we were quite cynical about showing these poor children, and then people just embrace it, and but anyway, so let's talk about your new method of doing film now. You besides your your own personal film about the restaurant.
Right. But the other sort of larger project that I have been involved in, I did, and one of the reasons I wanted to do it was because it was an opportunity to work in a completely different way than I've ever worked before, and I've actually never heard of a film made quite this way. But I was invited to make a film about ritual and prayer around the world. And that's obviously a huge subject, and I found some ways to narrow the subject. But the idea was to hire local filmmakers in all these different parts of the world. And I kind of mapped out the shape of the film, and how it would be organized. And then in a few cases, for example, I knew James personally, and I also knew that he had, I'll come back to James's part, because that's actually a little bit different. But what I would do is I found different filmmakers in different parts of the world who I felt could do one particular part of the film, and I hired. This is sacred. Oh, yeah. Sorry. So, so the film is about sort of the ways in which people make use of religious ritual and religious prayer to help them in their daily lives. That's the subject of the film, and so I commissioned. I commissioned about 25 filmmakers to do small pieces, and then I also turned to people like James who had work that hadn't been used, because in his case, because he was thrown out of Pakistan, and he made some of his footage available to me, and I used some of that, but and to very powerful effect. But the idea was, would it be possible to make a global film and never go to any of those countries? And that's sort of, if James is one end of the spectrum, he moved to Afghanistan and lived in Afghanistan for 3.5 years or 3 years to make this film. I did sort of the exact opposite, which is that I said to myself, there will be people who have local knowledge, local language skills, and a kind of intimacy culturally that I'm never going to have. And so let me work in collaboration with them. And that film was just finished, and I think it's a good film. So it's a very different way. It's just a very different model of work.
For those of you who haven't seen it, if you get a chance, Sacred. It's a good movie, and it's actually kind of amazing because it really is this montage, this collage of all these different things happening in different countries, shot by different filmmakers, and yet it all weaves together. And this may be a model for the future. You know, now it's probably just only recently that this kind of filmmaking really became possible, right? Because suddenly we have email, we can communicate with people, we can find other filmmakers. You can send footage over the internet potentially now, although I guess you did mostly hard drives.
No, but the communication was unbelievably easy in terms of, like, somebody would do an audio interview or a video interview with someone and as a possible character, and I could watch it the next day and give them feedback. It was just incredible that way.
Right, and I think actually this age of global communication, multimedia communication is actually underexploited in the world of filmmaking. We're still in the kind of traditional model. You go out with a camera by yourself or with a crew, and you stick to a subject for a while. And the fact is now you can diversify. You can work with people remotely. You can edit remotely. You can be trading back and forth edit files, as many of you already, of course, know. And I just think that mostly we do it less because our mindset is still in this old world of way of working. And what are the potential, like, how is this going to affect filmmaking? I think we don't really know that yet. We're still figuring it out.
But there are so many different ways of making films with iPhone, with the new DSLR cameras and 4K. We were talking about earlier. I mean, we should think about the future of documentary. And what do you think, Tom?
Well, the first rule of economics, and it's important as you think about your careers, is that when supply goes up, prices go down. And that is a reality. I'm earning less money than I did 10 years ago, even though I've had a lot of success during that time. And that's generally, I think, true. And it's very, very simple. If you can buy a camera for $2,000, or actually you can buy a camera for like $800 that can take unbelievably beautiful images. And if you can buy an editing system for $300 or something. So very, very many people can make films, and very many people are making films. So there's a lot of filmmaking going on. So the price that a broadcaster or a Netflix or a streamer or whatever is going to pay is going down because they have choices. They have so many choices. And so the economics, I think, are hard, and I don't see that changing anytime very soon, because I think there's only going to be more and more work getting done as people, you know, somebody told me an amazing fact, and I don't know if it's true, but they told me that if you think of all the photographs that have been taken in the whole history of photography, as many photographs have been taken since 2011 or 2012 as from 1835 or whenever photography was invented up to 2011, 2012, about that many pictures, the same amount have been taken in the last, 5 years or so. So with this huge flow of material, the professional, the person who's relying on this to make a living, is under a lot of pressure, and we have to be realistic about that.
Yeah, that's one thing. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is maybe like if we can think about what's happened with Hollywood filmmaking in the studios, where in the 90s, for example, or 80s and 90s, 70s, there was a lot of independent filmmaking going on, and there are all these smaller films that can be shown in movie theaters and make back their money, and then suddenly it's become these huge mammoth blockbuster movies where it's a kind of tentpole film, and that's just like Avatar or whatever, and it's going to show everywhere. The truth of it is, we're living in an age where, in a genre like documentary, there can be some Mozart now who goes out by themselves and makes a tentpole film, something that looks and sounds as good as any Hollywood feature, and is about a really important subject that grabs everybody and is accessible to everyone. Just because of their ambition and the way they made it, suddenly they've captured a large global audience. It can also happen like that. Just the fact that everybody has iPhones, or anyone can make a movie, doesn't mean that everybody's going to. I mean, anybody can write a symphony also if you have a piece of ruled paper and a pen. But do they do it? They don't do it. You need the craft, the talent, and most of all, you need the ambition and the tenacity to make something really significant. And no amount of camera equipment sitting in your in your house is gonna change that. It really depends on the filmmaker. Still, even with all of this technology, and yes, there's this sea of home movies on YouTube and Facebook, but what is really going to draw people's attention now in this new media landscape? What is going to be the big successful film? Is it going to be something that was created in a boardroom of some large media corporation by a bunch of suits? Or is it going to be someone who really comes up with an original idea? So that's another way of looking at the possible future, which is maybe more optimistic, but also demands more, I guess, intrinsically from the filmmaker.